Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Searching, starring John Cho, Deborah Messing, Joseph Lee, and Michelle Law, directed by Anish Chaganty. Forgive me if I said that wrong. Now, I remember going to theaters for this when it first, well, not opening weekend, but maybe eventually. And what did I think of it? Well, it's going to be the same as what I'm about to think of it now. But and why am I going to do this one? Because of the new movie Missing that's based on the minds of this one. So let's see how this goes. Let's get into it. We open the entire movie based on footage from the computer, starting with an old school looking background, which has got to hurt me for as far as age goes. And we see David Kim, played by John Cho, as a happy family man with his wife Pam and his young daughter Margot growing up over the years, as Margot loves Pokemon and Pam catches cancer and Margot playing the piano for practice, and eventually Pam goes in the hospital and unfortunately passes away from this terrible disease that is cancer. But the good news is we learn David is a loving husband to Pam, may she rest in peace, and loving father to Margot, who's now 16 years old and played by Michelle Law. And David reminds her as she goes to study hall at a friend's place to take out the trash. And I like how John Cho plays the father figure in this movie because remember, I originally know this guy from American Pie, where he pronounces mother, yeah, MILF, otherwise I'll call it. But I'm not going to say it on the show, so. David gets a call from his brother Peter, played by Joseph Lee, as he makes a recipe that Pam made when she was alive for a date that we never see on Peter's side of the computer. Because we're focused on David's side of the camera, which is for the best in my opinion, David puts the computer to sleep while Margot calls a couple of times while at night and tries to FaceTime him while he's asleep. And David wakes up to call back Margot to see if she got home and safely and taking out the trash. And what is with the damn trash? Is that like her chore? Well, it could be. I've had that situation before or something like that. Because I remember that when I lived with my parents over the years. Well, she left her laptop at home, and David gets worried about how she hasn't called him all day long, and he calls Margot's piano teacher to find out she's canceled piano 6 months ago, and talks to Peter, wondering where she went, as he wants to call the police, but doesn't, which will take a while. But he first and by he, I'm talking about David, calls one of her friends, Isaac, as he's on a camping trip in which Margot was invited to, but she forgot to remind her father. And another day goes by as we learn she never came in and decides to file a missing person report. And who gets assigned to his missing daughter's case? Detective Rosemary Vick, played by Deborah Messing, whom I haven't seen in anything in years. I'm not gonna lie, I remember seeing her back in the around mid 2000s. I was wondering what happened to her over the years, but here she came off rather odd to me. Not like I knew what the ending was going to be like, because I haven't gotten there yet. David tries to call every single friend to know what happened to Margot before she went missing and creates a chart for Detective Vick. And I'm gripped on my chair because I don't know what's going to happen next, and that's a good thing for a thriller. Detective Vick shows camera footage to David of how she left town, as I get the feeling she was followed by someone, and she creates a bank account by depositing her $100 piano lesson money per month to give someone $2,500 from Venmo. For what reason? Hopefully it'll explain later. I'm not sure. As she changed her name to Rachel Jung. Now, I don't know if that's true, but and it feels like she's a different person, as Detective Vick is led to believe she ran away from home while she drives, which doesn't sound right, but the mystery works, as I was scared the entire movie Margot became a criminal, while she creates a Tumblr account as she chats with Fish and Chips, whom we are led to believe is a 20-year-old Hannah, and David learns Margot quit piano and is afraid he wouldn't get why, as we see him in one of her videos on Tumblr, while Detective Vic is talking with David as she tells him that Hannah was on shift at a diner, in Pittsburgh. And she tells the story of a neighbor that her son stole money from her neighbor's house, as they make a point of sometimes parents don't know their kids, which can be true to life. You have to go through that phase at some point. I did. Although I don't have any kids. I'm talking about with my mom and dad and all that. So let's move on. And I admire the movie for that, as it makes perfect sense. David goes to a place where his daughter spent time for for the last 5 months at a lake called Barbosa Lake, which made me laugh because I thought of Captain Barbosa from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. But he calls Detective Vic in the middle of the night to get to that lake, and he believes Margot has been abducted, and they call people for help and put on the TV to search for Margot, and they put it all over the news. And I do like the acting by John Cho and Deborah Messing. I felt on the edge of my seat for how believable this can be to life, and it is and it is a, and is it a and it is a serious situation for damn sure. Detective Vic cuts off David from the case because David is close to the case as he talks with the kid at a movie theater and attacks him and puts him in the hospital. And we see the video, and he gets an email about a memorial service for Margot, despite she's not dead yet, according to him. And I'm getting the chills from this movie at this point because it's pretty intense, and unfortunately, it can happen in real life. David looks up her messages and sees Peter might be involved as he goes to his house to ask him what he and Margot talked about, as David gets rough with him and he confesses she wanted some weed from him, which is the reason why he had it in the beginning of the movie, while Detective Vic tries to call David and about how they caught the abductor of Margot, and this person named Randy Kartoff killed himself. And Detective Vic also tells him Margot is dead, which I'm not believing quite yet because I've got 30 minutes of movie left. As this doesn't add up to me because it still doesn't make sense. David admits it doesn't make sense. And as he puts out funeral services, he finds the girl Hannah on the website photo and is led to believe something was wrong as he finds her under Fish and Chips, which is her code name on UCast. That's what it's called. And he calls her to, as she doesn't know what UCast is. I'm sorry. If it's anybody that got the wrong idea about Tumblr, I think it was UCast I was talking about. I never could get caught up with these things, as she doesn't know what it is, and he calls Detective Vic, and she doesn't pick up and call the police and tries to call the police department, while he sees she and Randy were friends and get the chief of police involved and goes to the church to get Detective Vic arrested. As we learn on the TV, it was her, Detective Vic, and her son Robert, who crashed her car and left Margot in the middle of the desert, as it was her idea to do the whole thing after she gets a call from Robert telling her he made a mistake, as he pushed her to the ground as Robert was Fish and Chips on UCast. And the police arrest Robert, and she says Margot can't survive without water for 4 days? No, 6 days. But there was a storm a couple days ago before the funeral. But she didn't. And here's the thing: she never changed her name to Rachel or whatever the hell that name was earlier. She kept her name Margot, and they find her on a hill. The police, I mean. And this is a genius twist. And do we learn whether or not she is alive? The truth is, she's alive and is going to a music university, and this climax is well done. And thankfully, as she's thankfully alive, I gotta credit this director. Let me clap for her. Just a little briefly, my apologies. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 7.7 out of 10. This movie gave me the chills, as this one was one of the most intense movies I've seen in years, along with A Quiet Place, which is a better movie in my opinion. But I do like the acting by John Cho and Deborah Messing, as they take their role seriously, When I predicted Margot wasn't dead because I had 30 minutes of movie left, I knew there was something that wasn't adding up because it didn't make sense, which is a genius way to find out how Deborah Messing's character, as well as her son, was the reason for her missing case. I'll just say that. As it felt gripping, as it gripped on the edge of my seat, because this could happen in real life, and I really enjoyed how all real life this movie can be, and that's what I look forward to next time. I like the idea as it takes place on a computer with a point of view as David is as on his computer, and it has a good ending that I could get behind. And this is better than Unfriended. Remember that movie that came out that was a horror film from Blumhouse? That was terrible. But this is better by far. And I would give this movie a recommendation as it's a pretty good film at the end of the day. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me. And next time I will be back with Missing. And until then, let's go find Margot.